After taking care of the paralyzed CEO for 2 years, he recovered. The first thing he did was to propose to the white moonlight who had abandoned him. The media said they were inseparable and finally became a couple. I looked up at the live broadcast of the proposal scene on the big screen in the square, silent, and threw the ring in my pocket into the trash can. The debt I owed him was finally repaid. People on the pedestrian street all stopped and looked up at the outdoor big screen broadcasting the live proposal. Not only here, but all the big screens in London were showing the same proposal broadcast. The scene was very clear, even the faint tears of the female lead were visible. The setup of the venue was clearly Lewis's work. In the few months when he was almost fully recovered, he was drawing this draft. Even the style of the fireworks was personally handled by him. Back then, he held my nape, his fingertips cold, asking me what flowers I liked, and I said, hyacinths. But the entire proposal scene on the big screen was surrounded by a passionate sea of roses, and the standing female lead was not me but Lewis's ex-girlfriend, the star designer Gloria. I calmly threw away the dull ring in my pocket into the trash can. It was unattractive and too big. Fortunately, I didn't need to keep it anymore. I threw the ring into the trash can and felt the calmest I had ever been. Not a single tear fell. From then on, I had repaid all that I owed the Whites and Lewis. I was kicked out by the Whites group. I used to have my own office, but now, forget about the office, I couldn't even find a desk. The HR department handed me a cardboard box. Hannah, all your stuff is here. I had good relations with people in the company, and she lowered her voice. Lewis personally asked you to leave. Compensation is unavoidable. You better leave soon. Her tone was still gentle. I guessed Lewis's exact words were get lost. I leaned back in my chair with a bit of nonchalance and didn't care. I struggled to hug the box, and as I passed by my original office, I finally knew who its new owner was. It had been turned into Gloria's lounge, with scattered design drafts lying around. She and Lewis's intimate photos covered what used to be tightly packed schedules. I lowered my eyes, clenching my fingers around the edge of the box, which turned white for a moment. Soon, I let go. I was pushed down by the crowd at the company's entrance. The box fell, and my things scattered all over the ground. There were too many people gathered here, and someone's high heel accidentally stepped on the back of my hand, causing a sharp pain. The reporters and crowd surged in a certain direction. I endured the pain and raised my head, only to see Gloria appearing with a man. She liked red, her dark red dress was eye-catching, but the man next to her was even more dazzling. Lewis didn't like crowds. He turned his head a bit impatiently, but he still carefully protected Gloria in his arms. Reporters blocked Gloria's path, holding out a microphone, throwing questions one after another. Gloria, for the past week, your century proposal has been the top topic online. As the leading lady, do you have anything to say? Gloria smiled brightly. I am grateful that I have been by his side during his 2 years of life at the bottom. Lewis, sailing smoothly, standing on the mountaintop, only to encounter a car accident and paralysis for 2 years, facing the world's indifference. Anyone was more qualified than Gloria to say this, as she flew away directly in the past, leaving only me by Lewis's side. Such an obvious lie, but Lewis was quite happy to hear it, without any rebuttal, even indulgent. Lewis lowered his eyes, looking at Gloria very gently. Like a wildfire being extinguished upon reaching the river. The intermingling flashes of cameras captured the moment when the two lovers looked deeply into each other's eyes. Lewis suddenly turned his head, looking straight into my eyes over the crowd, his gaze almost icy. I looked quietly at him, smiled lightly, feeling relaxed in my heart. He subconsciously furrowed his brows. In fact, I was also very grateful that I was by Lewis's side during his 2 years of life at the bottom. I had repaid all my debts of gratitude as the taxi was taking too long to arrive, and I was feeling a bit low on blood sugar and had a stomach ache. I sat by the roadside holding my stomach. The hand that was stepped on was already swollen and bleeding, very painful. Gloria was indeed quite special to Lewis. I'd known Lewis for a long time. He had been the Prince of the Whites since childhood, and although he had been rumored with many, he only publicly admitted to having one girlfriend, Gloria. Rekindling their relationship was only natural. Suddenly, a car horn sounded in front of me, and I instinctively looked up to see a black car stopping in front of me. The window slowly rolled down, revealing Lewis's nonchalant face, his knuckles tapping the steering wheel. Another stomach ache? My eyelashes trembled. He sneered, his eyes mocking and disdainful. Serves you right. I lowered my eyes. It felt like 2 years ago, Lewis's attitude towards me. At that time, he was so cruel to me. He said, me being alive as a person like me is already a favor. Now I understood that all his later tenderness towards me was fake. He was afraid that if I left, no one would take care of him. I simply ignored him. The sound of high heels behind me. Gloria walked around me and got into the passenger seat, coquettishly saying, Lewis, I'm late, those reporters are too annoying. I shouldn't have let you go first. Can you help me deal with them? As Gloria fastened her seatbelt and saw me, her voice suddenly faltered, her face a bit pale. She hurriedly urged, Louis, let's go quickly, the event is getting a bit late. Louis unintentionally creased his brows. I endured the pain. Looking up at Louis, guessing this was the last time I would talk to him. I watched the engagement live broadcast, and the scene was even more beautiful than the draft he drew originally. Apart from not being a hyacinth, everything was fine. I thought for a moment and added, I wish you both 100 years of happiness. Louis stopped smiling, his hand resting on the car window tightened in an instant, veins showing white, as if he heard something other than a blessing. There was a wedding ring on that hand, and I lowered my eyes, missing the look Louis gave me. Gloria fell silent, softly saying, Louis, it's getting late, don't waste time on irrelevant people. A very calm voice came from above my head. Louis said, Hannah, don't regret it. He waited for a moment, but didn't hear a response. He sneered, started the engine again, and drove off with a press of the accelerator. I raised my head blankly, only seeing the taillights of the black car. He was driving away in a showy manner, just like how he used to race supercars. Even if it was a blessing, as long as it came from my mouth, Louis would inexplicably get angry. He was sick. But I wouldn't regret it. Having waited so long for a taxi, I had begun to resign myself to my fate when suddenly my phone vibrated. A message popped up, simple and to the point, where are you? I hesitated for a moment, then sent my location. Half an hour later, I was sitting in a business car, stiffly extending my hand, while the young man in front of me was treating my wounds. William raised his eyes. Does it hurt? I tensed my body fearing any movement, and shook my head. William glanced down, blew a cool breath on my hand, and my hand shrunk back. I opened my eyes wide and repeated, I said it doesn't hurt. Only then did William release my hand, slowly saying, I didn't hear that. I now felt like a treacherous vassal. As Louis's longtime follower, Louis had fought with William 10 times, and 11 times, they were archenemies. Especially during Louis's 2 years of paralysis, William almost swallowed all his assets. Although I don't have much to do with Louis now, it's still difficult to change overnight. William lazily leaned back. There is a banquet tonight, and I need a female companion. I looked down, my wound had been treated. Will Louis be there too? William nodded. I didn't look at him, and after a long pause, I finally spoke. If you're trying to hurt Louis by using me, you might be disappointed. He doesn't care about me. My voice was soft, calmly stating the facts. William fiddled with a lighter, a flash of fire illuminated his knuckles, and he said, that's not necessarily true. I turned my head to look out the window at the passing street scene and smiled. I remembered Louis when I was 17. He laughed unreservedly and contemptuously in front of all our friends. He said, Gloria? I could never like Gloria. When I was trying on dresses for the event, William was there the whole time. His eyes were critical, not satisfied with more than a dozen high-end dresses he tried on. Actually, I didn't want to go to that party, but William insisted, and I couldn't refuse. When I left the Whites half a month ago, I was not allowed to take anything with me, and it was the old lady from the booths who temporarily sheltered me. So I would try to fulfill whatever William wanted. As I tried on a silver-white dress, the skirt shimmered like the galaxy. William's gaze finally paused, and his Adam's apple rolled. This one. I looked into the mirror beside me, and suddenly froze. The person in the mirror was both unfamiliar and familiar, stunningly beautiful. Like the girl who had been quietly in the background behind Louis for years, so plain and unassuming, suddenly became the center of attention without equal. This was a side of myself I had never seen before. I reached out, cautiously touching the cool surface of the mirror. William stood behind me, a necklace slipping from his fingertips. He put it on me, his breath warm, his voice casual, Gloria. Not to spite them. Just to let Louis know he's not only paralyzed, but also blind. It was my first time attending such a formal event. After so many years by Louis's side, I was never his companion. We arrived rather late, and just before entering the banquet hall, I looked up at William. The hall lights momentarily illuminated his profile, his jawline sharp and dazzling. Murmurs of approval arose around us before I snapped out of it. Who is the girl William brought? Isn't he always unaccompanied? A person familiar with Louis suddenly looked at me, stunned. Isn't that Louis's unremarkable little assistant? Before the sentence finished, I heard the sound of a glass breaking on the floor. I followed the sound with my eyes. Louis stood nearby, a wine glass shattered on the floor, spilling onto Gloria's trailing skirt as she let out a soft scream. He paid no attention, staring directly at me, seeing me for the first time with a hint of bewilderment. I made him feel astonished and distant. Gloria lifted her head, took a moment to recognize me, looking incredibly incredulous. I nodded politely and started conversing with William. Lewis then noticed the man beside me, his eyes cooling, and he walked over quickly, reaching out to pull me over. William reacted swiftly, blocking him and pulling me back behind him. Lewis peered around William, looking at me. Gloria, come here. I had never stood in someone else's line in front of him, let alone hide behind someone else. Whenever he called my name, I used to run to him no matter how far he was. But not anymore. I didn't take a step back, and in a calm and peaceful manner as I always did when talking to him, I softly said, after all these years, I've done enough. The midsummer breeze blew through the window. Lewis, we have no connection anymore. His face turned pale in an instant. Midsummer is a season for unexpected encounters. I was a child sponsored by the Whites, not just me. Our county has been helped to rebuild by Lewis's mother since the earthquake. My first visit to the Whites' house was when I was 15, having ranked first in the school's exams that year. I was brought along with the teachers to express gratitude to Mrs. White. Mrs. White was as gentle as I had imagined, chatting with the adults about plans for the next year while handling countless phone calls, looking very busy. I stood to the side, glimpsing a photo on her desk. The youth in the photo was about my age, with delicate features, looking somewhat impatient at the camera. Arrogant as a prince. The butler suddenly knocked on the door, looking a bit distressed. Madam, the young master is out racing on his motorcycle again. Mrs. White, busy as she was, casually nodded, bring him back. The butler's expression was troubled. It seemed like a difficult task. The adults nearby pushed me forward, teasingly suggesting, Mrs. White, let Hannah go with him, she gets along well with people her age. Mrs. White's gaze finally fell on me. I clenched my fingers, mustered up courage, and nodded, I can do it. Even if I couldn't, I had to. I followed the butler to the area where Lewis was. He was only 17 at the time, but already carried himself with grace. The black and red motorbike zoomed through the wind and stopped when it approached me, his hand removing the helmet, revealing his long, tired eyes. He asked, who are you? I closed my eyes, my face pale. I thought I was about to be hit. After a pause, I managed to say, I'm Hannah. He showed some interest. His second sentence, Mrs. White sent me to bring you back. He turned cold. Lewis wasn't obedient, but I was stubborn too. I waited on the side of the road. And when he circled around and found me still there, he circled again. By the third round, he probably felt a bit embarrassed, got off the bike impatiently, and took me back with him. I trailed behind him, feeling like he was so tall. The midsummer evening breeze drifted by. I remembered his name. Lewis. Mrs. White wanted someone his age to keep an eye on Lewis, so she left me there, as Lewis's little sidekick, watching over him to prevent him from misbehaving. Lewis was in his teenage rebellion phase, particularly detested me, thinking I was his mother's spy. He always bullied me, but even after wiping away my tears, I continued to follow him. He didn't bother to care anymore. In Lewis's words, he was just fed up. Everyone knew that although Lewis was a womanizer, there was always a plain girl by his side, almost invisible, only appearing to stop him when he was up to no good. I had been studying hard, trying to meet Mrs. White's demands, and following Lewis for 7 or 8 years. All this time, I harbored a secret. The year I finished the college entrance exam, I stood under the wisteria tree, Lewis leaning on the courtyard railing. He spoke casually, but it felt like he suddenly gripped my heart, uncovering my secret. He asked, do you like me? I froze in place, unable to move for a long time. The wisteria flowers fell on me, and it took me a while to hear my own voice, very hoarse, yes. I like you. Lewis smiled and walked away. That evening, when I went to find Lewis, at the moment I pushed open the compartment door, I heard the young master of the Whites, lounging on the sofa, laughing freely. His voice was not loud, but it felt like I was going deaf, in pain not only in my ears, but everywhere. Who would like Hannah? I like Gloria. That was the first time I heard Gloria's name. I was 2 years younger than Lewis, and in order to enter his university early, I skipped a grade in high school. But at that moment, I suddenly understood that some things wouldn't be caught up to no matter how hard I tried. When I first saw Gloria with Lewis at 15, I never thought that many years later, our relationship would still be strained. Even causing a scene at someone else's party. Especially now, being Lewis's first event after his recovery. He and William never had a good relationship, and as soon as they entered, they attracted a lot of attention. Now they stood facing each other, with everyone watching the drama, both openly and subtly. I tugged William's sleeve and whispered, let's go. Lewis's eyelashes trembled, and I avoided his gaze. For the first time in all these years, he heard me say to someone else in his presence, let's go. We walked far away, and only then did I turn back to look. Lewis stood still, head down, and that feeling, like his fragility and chill when he woke up 2 years ago from the accident, when Mrs. White, who was in the same car, had already passed away. Gloria tried to touch him, holding the hem of her skirt, but was petrified by his glance. I chuckled. William raised an eyebrow. What's so funny? I whispered, just realized that not everyone can do it. Not everyone can tolerate Lewis's low air pressure and temper. Not everyone would choose to get close to him even after seeing his other side, especially during the time when he was paralyzed. As a proud son of heaven, Lewis could not accept that he had become disabled. He no longer smiled, his spirit was broken. And to make matters worse, his only relative, Mrs. White, also died in that car accident. During that time, Lewis had no will to live, and he repeatedly wanted to commit suicide. I smashed a glass, picked up a shard and forcefully drew it across my wrist. If you want to die, it's okay, I'll accompany you. Lewis had never seen me so ruthless with my emotions. His dark eyes stared at me for a long time, almost grinding his teeth, and promised, Hannah, I will get better. From then on, he actively cooperated with medical treatment. Finally, after 2 years, he stood up. And then, he threw away his wheelchair. After the dinner party, I returned to the booths with William. Thanks to William's grandmother for taking me in during this time, I was actively preparing my resume and planning to move out once I found a job. Actually, William and I weren't really familiar with each other. Every encounter we had was when Lewis and he finished a fight, and I had to apologize to his family on his behalf. His grandmother always welcomed me warmly, waving a fan and saying, "Oh, it's okay, young people fight sometimes, come and sit for a while." I would sit there for the entire afternoon, awkwardly watching as William's grandmother applied ointment on his wounds, with the afternoon sunlight streaming in. I felt even more guilty. I never expected that when I was in trouble, it was the booths who reached out to help me. William and I were not talkative people, so the car ride was unusually quiet. I was a bit reserved, sitting upright like a primary school student, not daring to look around, just staring straight ahead. But when I happened to glance through the rearview mirror and saw William, he must have been a bit tired, with his narrow eyes closed and lengthy eyelashes. The neon lights momentarily illuminated his face. William opened his eyes, sensing me looking at him through the mirror. It was a bit awkward, but not too much. I quietly averted my gaze. Suddenly, William chuckled and said, "Hannah, do you know what I thought the first time I saw you? How could I forget?" He had actually said it out loud in front of Lewis at that time. I nodded and said, "You asked me how blind I was, why else would I be following Lewis around?" Lewis was so angry he got into a fight with him again. William shook his head and closed his eyes. Outside, the bustling traffic flowed endlessly. The silence inside the car had lingered for too long that I thought he had fallen asleep, until I heard William softly say, "I thought, how well behaved she was. It had been a long time since I visited Mrs. White. I took a bunch of white flowers to her grave." Lewis had just taken over the company not long ago, when a truck out of control crashed into the White's car, resulting in the death and injury of the mother and son. She was a kind woman. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't even know where I would be today. I cleared the weeds around her grave a little, and chatted with her slowly. "Mrs. White, the charitable endeavors you cared about are still running smoothly, and the foundation's thank you letters pile up year after year, filling up an entire room." I lowered my gaze, watching a drop of dew about to fall from the flower. Lewis's paralysis had healed, and everything was back on track for White's group. He recently got engaged, and the media made a big fuss about it, describing the engagement ceremony as a once-in-a-lifetime event. "You know the leading lady too, it's Gloria, the girl Lewis brought home. They have a great relationship, and everything is moving in a positive direction. Only me, all these years, still stuck in the same place, with no direction." The woman in the photo on the tombstone looked gentle, as if she had listened to all of this. I touched the photo. "I have resigned from the company, would you blame me?" Of course, she wouldn't answer. The cemetery was silent, death has no sound. I covered my face, tears seeping through my fingers. Except for the initial days, I hadn't been happy here. Sometimes I wonder, if I hadn't topped the exams that year, I wouldn't have ended up here. I cried quietly for some time, before packing up and preparing to leave. When I stood up, I noticed someone standing not far away. I didn't know how long they had been watching. I lowered my gaze. There was only one way out of the cemetery, towards Lewis's direction. He probably came to visit Mrs. White, just at the wrong time. And that's how we bumped into each other. As I was passing by him, I heard Lewis speak, crying at my mother's grave, "You." Before he could utter more mocking words, I turned around, looked up at him, tears brimming in his eyes, but not falling. Lewis swallowed the remaining words in his mouth. Actually, my relationship with Lewis wasn't that bad. Such atrocious attitudes had only occurred twice, once when I was tired of being Lewis's assistant, secretly reapplying for jobs, which he found out, leading to an outrage, and the recent incident where he received an email and then kicked me out of the Whites. Coincidentally, one incident before the accident, one after. 2 years apart. But I was no longer as devastated as I was back then. I just silently watched him, and asked the person I had been long ago, Lewis, did you really think I wouldn't be upset just because I never showed emotions in front of you? Did you really think that no matter how you acted up, I would always follow you like I was 15 years old, and always be there for you? Lewis pursed his lips, his eyes dark. His hand hanging by his side curled a few times, then clenched tightly in an instant. Lewis sneered and raised his lips, saying, Hannah, you'll never clear your debt. You killed my mother, what are you pretending for? By the time I got back, my mind was still foggy. Lewis, looking down on me, threw one last sentence at me, that accident wasn't accidental at all. Guess who betrayed the Whites? I received an email in my inbox, trembling hands clicked it open. It was filled with information collected by Lewis's people, various signs indicating that the car accident years ago was actually a premeditated act. At that time, Mrs. White and Lewis were on their way to sign a big contract. Their whereabouts those days were kept top secret, except to me. Only I knew. I was Lewis's assistant, and had grown up with the Whites. They had always trusted me. There was a photo in the email, showing me negotiating with people from a rival group, a shot taken very close to the time of the accident. But the photo was doctored, and I didn't recognize the person in it at all. In Lewis's eyes, I was the only loose end. Even without directly questioning me, he had already judged me. I wryly smiled, my whole body curled up in the seat. No wonder the day before he had the proposal venue set up, the next day he told me to leave. No wonder he preferred to pursue Gloria, rather than have any association with me again. I closed the email without even trying to defend myself, because I knew Lewis wouldn't listen. If only Lewis had gone a step further and investigated a bit more, he would have known that the people who knew his whereabouts weren't just me, but also Gloria. I hadn't slept this long in ages. Before Lewis's accident, I had still been applying to new jobs behind his back. Gloria had been too aggressive, and I was genuinely tired of her. She was the only legitimate girlfriend Lewis had in so many years, and she was so spoiled by him that she behaved recklessly. I had been in trouble with his previous female friends before, but nothing as intense as this. Can you imagine a young woman in her 20s being publicly humiliated as a harlot in front of the whole company? Gloria had done just that. During those few days when Lewis was negotiating the contract, their whereabouts were kept secret, even from Gloria. She couldn't reach Lewis, but I knew where he was. She asked me, I didn't tell her, and even blocked her from entering the CEO's office. The whole company knew she was Lewis's favorite, but I fearlessly stood in her way. Gloria called the company's people to watch, and slapped me across the face in front of everyone. She said something like this, Hannah, even if you stripped naked in front of Lewis, he wouldn't spare you a glance. Get lost. Do you think clinging to the Whites will help you elevate yourself from your impoverished background? Following Lewis around day in day out, sickening, no different from a mistress. Even though I haven't done anything wrong, in full view of everyone, I felt as if I had been stripped naked and shamed. She burst into the office, checked Lewis's schedule, and then the next day the accident happened. I had never thought ill of Gloria. Because Lewis and Mrs. White had treated her so well. Now I understand, it's only those who are unloved that carefully document the kindness of others, desperately trying to figure out how to reciprocate that kindness. And that's who I am. I woke up to a different world. The hottest topic on Facebook was about the London Whites car accident conspiracy. Everyone loves a scandal involving the wealthy, especially after Lewis's extravagant proposal had dominated the internet for so long. An insider revealed that Lewis's car accident was not an accident at all, but a premeditated incident orchestrated by a rival group, with the help of an insider who leaked Lewis's whereabouts, his former assistant who had been sponsored by the Whites for years. An attached photo showed me negotiating with the rival group, the same one I had received in my inbox. The revelations were shocking and felt as real as witnessing something firsthand. Gloria also responded, appearing more subdued than before as she softly stated on camera, Hannah? I never liked her, but she was always following Lewis. We even had a falling out because of her. I never expected her to do such a thing. The interview was filled with accusations and insinuations, painting me as a villain straight out of a wealthy family drama, being portrayed as a ruthless opportunist seeking revenge. Lewis stood nearby, looking detached and indifferent. I had read the online comments. Despite having employed this assistant for so long, she turned out to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, causing disappointment to Mrs. White. Gloria was also pitiful, the way she had to depend on her assistant's whims even in matters of love. Someone suddenly snatched my phone from my hand, and when I looked up, William was staring at my pale face, urging me to stop reading as his grandmother had called us for dinner. I tried to explain, but he just said, "I know," and genuinely believed me. Similar to what was shared by online users, job interviewers who had conversed well with me were now refusing to hire me. With this stain on my reputation, it seemed I would be shunned by society forever, unable to find employment. This was the ending Lewis wanted for me, bleak and full of despair. Only the Booths company dared to offer me a job, as I had applied everywhere, including the Booths. Yet, when they made an offer, I declined. William, looking at my resume, asked me, why? I shook my head, explaining that my tainted reputation would only bring trouble to even such a prestigious company like the Booths. William turned his head, gazing at me quietly for a moment, and then with a tinge of helplessness, he smiled, saying, "Gloria, you are indeed slow to react. Slow to react?" I stared at him, caught off guard, but before I could reply, the police arrived and took me away. The Whites had reported the incident, and as a person of interest and suspect from the event years ago, I was to face interrogation. Before entering the interrogation room, I caught sight of Lewis and Gloria. Both of them wore expressions that were intriguing. Gloria exuded a gambler's resolve. Having handled things intricately over the past few years, she probably had gotten rid of any evidence long ago. The only obstacle remaining between her and Lewis was me. With me sent to jail, Gloria could finally rest easy, and not only was the extravagant proposal true, but an incredible wedding was also on the horizon, which would make her the envied Mrs. White. Lewis looked at me with a mix of emotions, his jaw clenched tight. I noticed his hands were trembling slightly while absently fiddling with his fingertips. Meeting my eyes briefly, he then averted his gaze, with a hint of redness at the corners. I turned away and entered the interrogation room. Over several hours, the police combed through the details of my life, leaving no stone unturned. Besides the incriminating photo, more evidence emerged implicating me, forming a meticulous net that seemed destined to entangle me. I was temporarily held in custody for about 10 days. Though the period wasn't long. The impact of the White's car accident case online had been significant. The conspiracy theories were rampant, and the authorities had to be thorough in their investigation, not missing any shred of evidence. During these 10 days, I didn't think much. It was the best rest I had had in a long time, sleeping soundly in the darkness. On the 10th day, the truth of the case came to light, and I was acquitted. As my innocence was proclaimed, another person was added to the list of fugitives, Gloria. The unveiling of this declaration truly brought about repercussions. The interviewers who had previously rejected me circled back, expressing interest in hiring me. I declined all offers, including the one from the Booths, for I had no intention of joining any of them. My hometown called, and a respected teacher from my school, highly regarded like Mrs. White, asked if I would be willing to return to teach and support the educational development in the region. I agreed. I paid a final visit to the Whites, and this time, nobody stood in my way. I had left behind everything at the Whites before, thinking my room would be dusty and abandoned. To my surprise, when I opened the door, everything was spotless and bright, with sunlight streaming onto a newly folded flower on the table. As I swiftly packed my belongings, I hesitated when pulling open a drawer. Eventually, I retrieved an old photograph from a hidden compartment inside the drawer. It was a picture taken of Lewis when we were 17, captured in a moment of youthful exuberance, with the wind ruffling his hair as he walked ahead playfully with friends, glancing back as if to see if someone was following. It was a picture I had secretly taken of Lewis. I chose not to take the photo with me, leaving it on the table instead. Whether Lewis would keep it hidden away or discard it, it was his decision to make. The purple wisteria tree in the courtyard bloomed once again, its delicate flowers cascading gracefully. I stood there, admiring the sight. Lewis stood behind me, softly calling my name, Gloria. It seemed as though he didn't want to disturb what felt like a dream. Turning around, I smiled at him calmly. Lewis, with bruises under his eyes, a slight beard growing on his chin, had shed his air of arrogance. As the heir of the Whites, I had never witnessed Lewis look so cautious and almost humbled. His eyes flickered, his voice hoarse as he said, "Since recovering from my injuries, I have been investigating the car accident nonstop. When I found out it was linked to you, I couldn't continue. Just the thought of that evidence was suffocating. I never thought you would betray us." Once that idea took root, it was impossible to ignore. He chuckled ruefully. "You understand, right? People like us are no strangers to betrayal, we are used to being backstabbed. But when it involves you, I can't handle it. Do you know what I thought as I went through the files? I wished I had died in that car accident. All that followed, like the grand proposal, was just for your benefit." He said a lot, talking about his inner journey. But I just looked at him with clear eyes and gently interrupted, "No. Lewis was stunned. I smiled and said, actually, when you did it, you already knew you were wrong. But you felt it didn't matter, whether my betrayal was a misunderstanding or real. No matter what you did, I will forgive you. In fact, I have always been very clear that if it weren't for Lewis being paralyzed, with everyone around him falling over each other to please him, he wouldn't have noticed me. His gaze always lingered on girls like Gloria. Even the ring he gave me at that time was the wrong size. He remained silent for a long time, and I thought it was the shadow of a falling leaf on the ground. I didn't expect it to be tears falling from Lewis. He reached out to hold my wrist and begged, I'm a scoundrel. Can you forgive me one last time? The purple wisteria tree swayed shards of light, reminding me of a long time ago, when I was 17. Lewis leaned against the railing and lazily asked me, Gloria, do you like me? But no, I thought for a moment, gently pulled away his hand, and said, I will not forgive you. He saw the gray-brown scar on my wrist, his pupils constricted, his lips trembling, but he couldn't say a word. I patiently spoke to him as if coaxing a child. Lewis, Mrs. White saved your life in the car accident. You must live well. The Whites group is her life's work, and you must protect it. I'm leaving. Lewis's face turned pale, blood-drained. At that moment, it was as if his heart had been hollowed out. Someone he took for granted was leaving him forever. The midsummer wind never looks back. Recently, the winds of change in London have turned. The protagonists of what was once called the proposal of the century, one has become a scumbag, and the other a vile woman. Gloria has sinned, and Lewis has been an accomplice. The stock of White's group plummeted, and for unknown reasons, Lewis crashed his car and broke his legs, forced to sit in a wheelchair. As I sat on the bus heading home, I received a text message from Lewis. He said, I will repay you what I owe you. I casually blocked him. I looked out the window at the scenery, rocking back and forth, just like when I arrived. The reflection of the person next to me on the window glass, William, seemed to be sleeping deeply, leaning against the seat with his eyes closed. He, a CEO, insisted on personally transporting high school supplies and insisted on coming along. I couldn't stop him, so I let him follow me. The bus swayed, William's head resting on my shoulder, still asleep. I smiled and pursed my lips. I looked ahead, the scenery changing along the way, but I was certain that I was about to embrace my countless midsummers.